Okay, so here we are again. We're doing so you want to be a missionary for the LDS Church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you're going to run into you're going to have to say, do I really believe that? And so in session 1, we went through some things in the Gospel Topics essays. Just a few of them. We got some more, although we started off in Genesis and Abraham chapter 4 with the creation story, where we learned that the earth was created in 6 days. However, a day with God is like 1,000 years to man. Of course, if the earth is really 4.5 billion years old, that's a little off. The book of Abraham doesn't specify that they are days. However, if we do kind of just tend to believe that the days were maybe semi-equally long creative periods, the odd thing we noticed was that for this particular world, God, had a 6-day process, including placing Adam and Eve on the earth, I guess, in day 6. But on day 4, he created essentially the rest of the entire universe. So if we believe that we are floating in space on a globe, on a ball, and that there are trillions of stars, not just billions in our galaxy, trillions plus the worlds around them, that appears to have all happened on day 4, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Because, a trillion is a lot. And 10 trillion is a lot more than a trillion. And if you can create a trillion stars, but, on one day, day 4, but it takes you 6 days to get it all done with this Earth, something seems a little fishy. Of course, we also noticed that it said the stars were set up there with the moon, where the nighttime was, and it's the kind of thing that a primitive man might say, or it's the kind of thing that someone who was looking up, was in a planetarium, viewing things like on some kind of a domed screen, if you were in a planetarium, would maybe work. So it works great for people who are all into the whole flat Earth thing, but it doesn't work really well for people that believe we have trillions of stars, and yet it took God 6 days to create one Earth, and one of those days was devoted to the entire rest of the universe. So that was a little weird, just a little. And then we got into these Gospel Topics essays. Of course, then again, if the Earth is round, you'd disappear after walking about 20 feet due to the curvature. You'd go down like 13 feet if you walk 20. That's simple math. It's like 63%. It's like you walk 1 mile, you've gone down 1 kilometer. That's the way circles work, and they don't change if they're bigger. So I haven't figured out the universe, but we don't have curved pipes either. So Gospel Topics essays, we talked about the world of Nephi. We talk about the fact that God told Nephi and Lehi and all those guys that they basically had the place to themselves. And that's exactly opposite what they tell us in the Gospel Topics essay, having to do with DNA studies and the Book of Mormon. That being the case because they needed to come up with a way that these Lamanites just vanished, because we don't have any Israelite DNA here. Or maybe they can find some little tiny speck, and where'd that come from? Did it come after Columbus or something? Who knows? But see, the problem was Jeffrey Holland here in this Promised Land Ensign article said that the land was without habitation after the flood of Noah. So it was washed clean, and the Lord divided up Pangea, as we tend to call it. He didn't use the word Pangea, the continents. He separated the continents right after the flood of Noah, right about the time of these Jaredites. So about around 2,200 years before the time of Christ. The flood's supposed to be 2344 BC, wiping out everybody except for 8 people. Except for it didn't wipe out the people that were in the Americas. that came long before Adam that the Lamanites disappeared into now, according to the church essay. They came long before Adam. They were not wiped away by a flood, but then again, neither were the people in Egypt or Babylon or Sumer or China or probably just about anywhere else. So the flood has historical problems because God forgot to tell people that they got wiped out by the Jewish fairy tale. It's a problem. You know, Christians like to argue about how many elephants you can stick on an ark or something, how about all these animals, but they don't usually probably talk much about history because, see, the people didn't get washed away after all. They have histories that are recorded, they lived right through it. And the American Indians were here, and evidently they came about 15,000 years ago. Yeah, so basically everything's thrown out. That just wiped out Christianity, the Book of Mormon, the Bible, the whole thing. We can go home now. Save 10%. But there's so much more in these gospel topic essays. So Jeffrey Holland did a real number on himself here in this Ensign article because he contradicts everything that they're now telling us. God's eternal truths have changed once again. Yeah. Isn't that great? So anyway, let's get into... so we're here using Puffin. And let's take a look. Let's get back into the Gospel Topics Essays. Here's the Gospel Topics Essays home. You know, one thing we didn't really look at there was... This is where people usually get into it. And so they've got these decoys at first, the ones that aren't really problematic. Are Mormons Christian? Love and religious freedom. And so this is what people see, you know, this is the camouflage, because basically these things were designed so that you'd only land on them if you're like Googling for something that could send you onto a page that was already going to tell you things that were not going to work too well with your primary and Sunday school lessons and things like that. You know, things like, why was the Book of Abraham a total fake, or why did Joseph Smith take other guys' wives, or why was the DNA of the American Indians showing that they're from Siberia and they're not Israelites, or why did Joseph Smith tell different stories about his first vision and he's different ages and was there for different reasons, and all kinds of different things happen and they just contradict each other and things like that. So if you typed in a search like that, then the church wants you to find what they've got because they can at least try to make it sound as good as possible. But if you don't already know it, they don't really want you to stumble onto it on the church's website. So they got all these decoys. So it started off with bright and shiny here, so you can punch into something that's going to be not threatening your testimony with all those 3 articles, essays. So then they had the preface. We started to look at that, and oh wow, there's nothing there. So you're tempted to the bright and shiny stuff, but if you get through that, you can find this little hyperlink, and this is about where we were before. So this is where they tell us that God really doesn't want us to look at other websites because they aren't reliable. Yeah, He only wants us to look at, the Lord wants, it's an invitation from the Lord to recognize that not all sources of knowledge are equally reliable. Yeah. So we want to have we got to watch out for those unreliable sources. Wow. And then it goes on to talk more about how we should be scared of the internet because we might, this is the same thing Jehovah's Witnesses do too. They say you better stay on jw.org, don't wander off because, Satan is lurking on the internet and he wants to take you away from Jehovah God and the one true church called the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. Also formed by a guy who was into Freemasonry, oddly enough. What a coincidence. Okay, so it says that the first presidency figured out that in 2013 that there were questionable and often inaccurate sources of information about the church. So they just decided to gather some information and write some straightforward and in-depth essays on a number of topics. So they're going to get it straight for us, and so I've done a number of videos on these. which get into more detail than I'm actually getting on here, but we're covering a couple of them and a few of them at the time here, taking a look at what the real issues are. So they go on to tell us that the church really wants us to know about church history, be very well informed, but they don't advertise this very well. That's for darn sure. Excuse me, I don't want to scare away our good faithful members of the church here. So here's the topics: Mormons, Christians, becoming like God, Book of Mormon, and DNA studies. And so that was one where we just looked at where they blatantly told us that the Lamanites were not alone, and the Jaredites were not alone. They weren't even necessarily the main people here, but we looked in the Book of Mormon and it actually said the opposite of that. God promised to protect the land so other people wouldn't find it, so they could have it to themselves. So they lied. That's called, a blatant lie. We looked a little at the Book of Mormon translation, where Joseph Smith was using his brown magic rock in his hat like he'd been using to search for treasure, and when they were like offering sacrifices of black goats and sheep and dogs to demons who were guarding pirate treasure and stuff like that. It's called practicing magic. They like to call it folk magic, but when you're killing things, that turns more like black magic, in my opinion. Folk just sounds better, doesn't it? Searching for treasure is one thing. Killing animals, and making them march around a circle till they bleed to death from having their necks sliced, that's another. The multiple first vision accounts, done videos on that, very detailed, showing that it's nothing like what you've been told in primary or Sunday school. Joseph Smith's teachings about priesthood and temple, I'm not going to look at that right now. Mother in heaven, that's another decoy. Peace and violence in the Latter-day Saints. We're not going to look at that right now. That's the Danites, so that's basically like Freemasonry on steroids. Plural marriage. Okay, so plural marriage, that's, Brigham Young was into plural marriage. Joseph Smith was into the spiritual wife system, basically having about, 600 or more women functioning as on-call prostitutes in Nauvoo. Being completely exploited. And we don't hear that from the church, do we? So we're going to look at a couple things on the race and priesthood, and look a little bit about the Book of Abraham. The story of Abraham that Joseph Smith came up with 7 years after he wasted all that money of somebody else's and couldn't seem to translate what should have been done in 2 days if he just used the seer stone method that works so well for the Book of Mormon, instead of taking 7 years before he got around to it, just in time to keep the Negroes out of the temple, because he brought in Freemasonry, which was segregated. So let's look at the race and priesthood one real quickly, because this is a major issue. See how happy these black people are that they can go to the temple now? God changed his mind. So you can read all the spiel that it says about how God loves everybody equally and all that kind of stuff. Even though, of course, the Bible tells us he's all about loving the Hebrews more than anybody else. And it just says that, Brigham Young and the other prophets, they were crowd followers, so they were just racists, and it's all their fault. Even though, Joseph Smith put it in the Book of Abraham that the Canaanites can't have the priesthood just in time to keep them out of the temple endowments. Okay, so here was the part that I wanted to just take a peek at. The church today the church disavows the theories advanced in the past that black skin is a sign of divine disfavor or a curse. Okay, great. So it says right there that the church denies that these are just false theories that said that black skin is a curse. And so, of course, what we find here is that the Book of Mormon says otherwise. We're in Second Nephi chapter 5, and we're going to start at verse 21 real quick. And this is not new to some of you, but if you're thinking about a mission, you may not be aware of all these things. So let's just see how truthful these Gospel Topics essays are. So here it is. And he had caused the cursing Oh, I thought they just said it wasn't a curse. He had caused the cursing to come upon them, yea, even a sore cursing, because of their iniquity. For behold, they had hardened their hearts against him, that they had become like unto a flint. A flint being something hard and usually black that you can use to light a fire with, striking flint against each other. But they become like unto a flint, wherefore as they were white and exceedingly fair and delightsome, that they might not be enticing unto my people, the Lord God did cause a skin of blackness to come upon them. As what? As a sore cursing. Oh, so that's exactly opposite of what they just told us, and those are approved by the first presidency. Oh, I should have read that part. It wasn't that forward. Maybe we'll go back and look at that, just because I think it's nice to see where it says that the first presidency approved those. And cursed shall be the seed of him that mixeth with their seed, for they shall be cursed, even with the same cursing. And the Lord spake it, and it was done. So, poof! You are now very tan. And because of their cursing which was upon them, they did become an idle people, full of mischief and subtly. And they did seek in the wilderness for beasts of prey. I'll say they started eating jaguars or something because their skin was dark. Do you ever go out and get a tan or something, go to the beach, and then you feel like hunting jaguars or something? Or maybe mountain lions or coyotes. Yeah, that's for sure, man. Okay, yeah, it was a sore cursing. He had caused a cursing to come upon them, yea, even a sore cursing because of their iniquity. So whereas because they used to be nice and good looking and white, he made them ugly and dark. So they would not be enticing. So they would not be attractive. Okay. Yeah. Let's look again and see what does it say in Alma. And the skins of the Lamanites, this is Alma chapter 3, in case you're wondering, were dark, according to the mark which was set upon their fathers, which was a curse upon them because of their transgression and their rebellion against their brethren, who consisted of Nephi, Jacob, Joseph, and Sam, who were good guys. Well, how about that? So he also cursed the Ishmaelitish women because they were married to these guys, so they got cursed too. And this was done that their seed, their descendants, might be distinguished from the seed of their brethren, even though Nephi's people left the area, went many days into the wilderness, but somehow that wasn't enough to separate them on continents where they should have been like the only people, according to what we also read earlier in the other video. 2 Nephi chapter 1, I think. And this was done that their seed might be distinguished from the seed of their brethren, that thereby the Lord God might preserve his people, that they might not mix and believe in incorrect traditions which would prove their destruction. So they didn't want them to marry Lamanites, they didn't want them to mix, did not want anybody to have interracial marriage with the new race of dark-skinned Lamanites that just happened to look exactly like the Siberian people that came over 15,000 years ago, and DNA tests showed that that's what they are. And it came to pass that whosoever did mingle his seed, I hope your parents told you about the birds and the bees by now, with that of the Lamanites did bring the same curse upon his seed. Therefore, whosoever suffered himself to be led away by the Lamanites was called under that head, and there was a mark set upon him. We read about the mark of Cain. The Bible doesn't say that mark means dark skin, but it seemed to be interpreted that way. But Joseph Smith, he fixes that for us in the inspired version. He lets us know that they were black. And they could not hang out with anybody else because they were Negroes. That's in Moses chapter 7. We'll get to that. And it came to pass that whosoever would not believe in the tradition of the Lamanites, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so Nephites are the good guys. white people were the good guys, and the bad guys got a big tan. So they didn't have to go out and work on their tan. But wait, it said it wasn't a curse, and they were approved by the first presidency. So what's the deal? How can they say these things to us if they're supposed to be honest? Gospel topics home. Help! How do we understand these things? Why are the brethren lying to us with these evil essay writers? Okay, the purpose of these essays, which have been approved by the first presidency and the quorum of the 12 apostles, has been to gather accurate information from many different sources and publications and place them in the Gospel Topics section of LDS.org, where the material can more easily be accessed and studied by church members and other interested parties. Don't have to worry. They've got all the truth for us right on LDS.org. Well, we found that on LDS.org, but not in the essay. The essay told us differently. The essay said that's not true. Approved by the first presidency and the quorum of the 12, and it said, like we just saw, the happily Negro people standing in front of the temple, and they're so happy because God loves everybody equally, and because today the church disavows the theories advanced in the past that black skin is a sign of divine disfavor or a curse. It goes on to say that covers the excuse of why God did this to them so that they couldn't have the priesthood, because we were told by people like Orson Pratt and then folks later on like Peterson and McConkie and everybody else, that it reflected unrighteous actions in the premortal life. In other words, they were sitting on a fence or doing something other than arguing with Lucifer about free agency. Yeah, so God had to have a reason for wrecking these people's lives, so it's what they screwed up in the premortal existence. They were doing the wrong thing. Or that mixed race marriages are a sin, or that blacks or people of any other race or ethnicity are inferior in any way to anyone else. Blacks. They want to focus on blacks here, but we specifically heard it was a curse, that black skin was a curse with the Lamanites, but they want to try to just leave this to the priesthood issue, because that's where it's been the biggest sore for the church, with people saying, how come Negroes can't receive priesthood? Because Lamanites got a nice tan, but they could still go to the temple. But the Negroes, no. Unless they're a Fijian Negro, then as soon as about like 1957 or something like that, then they could. You know, I'm not sure for the Aborigine people in Australia, when maybe they always could, I don't know. Or maybe they were about the same time, 57. But it was 1978 before all Negroes could have the priesthood and go to the temple. Church leaders today unequivocally condemn all racism, past and present, in any form. So it said that the Lord spake it and it was done. The Lord cursed them with a sore cursing of dark skin. It didn't say that Nephi did it. It didn't say that George Albert Smith did it. It didn't say Joseph Smith did it. It didn't say Hubert Humphrey did it. It said that the Lord did it. So, the Lord is the racist, according to the Book of Mormon, who did that. But now let's take a look at something else. We are trying to talk about Negroes here, so let's see what Moses chapter 7 says about black skin. It starts off really nice. Enoch is having a vision, and he sees God face to face. Verse 4, and I saw the Lord, and he stood before my face, and he talked with me, even as one man talketh with another face to face. So, he ought to have it pretty straight there. And of course, this is pretty weird, since this happened 1,000 years before Brother Jared was told by Jesus that no one had ever seen him before. So, that's another story for another session. Jesus just isn't that honest, apparently. And again the Lord said to me, Look, and I looked towards the north, and I beheld the people of Canaan, and they dwelt in tents. And the Lord said to me, Prophesy. And I prophesied, saying, Behold, the people of Canaan, which are numerous, shall go forth in battle array against the people of Shum, and shall slay them, that they shall be utterly destroyed. They shall utterly be destroyed. And the people of Canaan shall divide themselves in the land, and the land shall be barren and unfruitful, and none other people shall dwell there but the people of Canaan. Nobody else, only one type of people, one race. And it's a place that's not very nice. It's a place that sounds a lot like the Sahara Desert. For behold, the Lord shall curse the land with much heat, and the barrenness thereof shall go forth forever. And there was a blackness that came upon all the children of Canaan. Uh-oh, the Lord turned them black. He's into black magic. Poof! You're a Negro. Black magic. And they all turned black. And there was a blackness that came upon all the children of Canaan, that they were despised among all people. Despised. That doesn't sound like they're very well liked. Of course, if they're the only people in the whole land, like the whole continent, who's there to despise them? Good question. I'm glad I asked. Okay, so a particular land or continent where only people who are black live. Where is that? And so they walked all the way there from Missouri, evidently, to Africa. That's pretty good. But that's okay. The continents weren't divided yet, even though it still was thousands of miles. So anyway, Enoch is told to go teach everybody about the gospel, except for the people of Canaan, because they're hopeless. And it says, And it came to pass that Enoch continued to call upon all the people, save, that means except for, it were the people of Canaan, to repent. So he didn't screw around with them. They were worthless. They were hopeless because they're a bunch of murderers. Now in verse 22. Now this is after he talked about this wonderful city of Zion that Enoch built with Jesus so they could all live together 1,000 years before he told the brother of Jared no one's ever seen him before and lied to him. Enoch beheld the residue of the people, in other words, the rest of the people, that weren't in his totally awesome city that was floating up over the earth to where people had to get beamed up when they got converted by the Holy Spirit or an angel. Yeah, it actually says pretty much that. It doesn't say beamed up, but it pretty much does. And Enoch also beheld the residue of the people, which were the sons of Adam, and they were a mixture of all the seed of Adam, save it was, in other words, except for, save it was the seed of Cain. For the seed of Cain were black, and had not place among them. And after that, Zion was taken up into heaven, and Enoch beheld, and lo, all the nations of the earth were before him, blah, blah, blah. So, once again, we've got the Negroes clearly identified as separated, and they were despised, and they were a bunch of nasty murderers for the people of Canaan. And this part here, so Cain was, cursed with a mark on him. And that used to link here, but they got rid of the hyperlink, so it makes it harder for us to find out what they used to teach us so plainly. So, how does this go with what we just read? It said the skin of blackness was not a curse. And, there was nothing wrong with being black and anything like that. But here it just very clearly says the opposite. So they are lying to us, or they're telling us that these scriptures are a bunch of BS. But they still have these scriptures, so... And if they get rid of them, then they're just saying Joseph Smith wasn't a prophet, so where'd they get their authority from? It gets pretty difficult. So instead they just get rid of the hyperlinks, give us the new 2013 scriptures, and make it more difficult to find what was commonly taught to us in the past. Now, as we look at the scriptures, we have to search a little more. But, sorry, they lied to us. The race and priesthood thing completely and totally lies to us. Because clearly, being despised turned black so you can be despised, or loathsome so the Nephites won't like you, or whatever, and cursed with a mark upon you that's a curse, and your children are cursed if they mix with anybody that's got a tan. So that's not what they're teaching now in the Gospel Topics Essays, and they say it was always wrong. Although this says basically all this stuff indicates that God did it. So, I guess they're condemning God, but so who do they get their authority from? Oh, that's right. The shareholders that elect the board of directors and the corporation of the president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But I thought it was God. Silly me. Okay, so that's the race and priesthood one. And I want to look at Abraham chapter 1, because Abraham chapter 1 tells us that Canaanites cannot have the priesthood. That's what Joseph Smith wrote in 1842, the same time he became a Freemason and brought Freemasonry into the temple. Well, they didn't have the temple right then. They just did endowments somewhere else, like over the store or something. But they did the endowments. They brought Freemasonry into it, and you can't have mixing races in Freemasonry, at least then. So it was a problem, because black Freemasons go to the Prince Hall rite. Hey, where'd our black guys go? Come on, black Freemasons. See these guys? Alright. If you're white, sorry, you can't join their deal. They're prejudiced. And if you're black, you can't or couldn't join the... See, these are the black Freemasons. Prince Hall. Prince Hall does not mix with York Rite or Scottish Rite. At least they didn't back then. I don't know about now. I haven't noticed. I haven't been in any Masonic temples with the Negroes in them. But, these guys don't look like they're letting any white boys hang out with them. And so that's just the way Freemasonry functioned. So we had to figure out a way to keep people separated, and the Book of Abraham took care of that, even though the church wants to blame it all on Brigham Young, because they don't want us to think about Freemasonry. They don't want us to realize that they're still hooked in with the Freemasons because of Lucifer being their god, little things like that. That kind of stuff bothers people sometimes. I don't know why. Just kidding. Okay, so Abraham, the Book of Abraham, this video I did, so it's more in depth, and we're just kind of touching on these things here. I got a number of videos that are rather in depth here. Oh, Mark. How does Jesus feel about people? He's supposed to be all-inclusive. The three Mormons tell us, right? Jesus is all about being inclusive of all races and stuff like that. But if we actually read what Jesus did here, we got to, it's a little different between like Mark and Luke or something. But he's got this woman comes to him who was probably a Negro, because it says that she was from of Cain, Canaanite-ish woman, but in the other one like Luke or Matthew, but in this one maybe it's Mark, I don't know. Anyway, in this one, this is Mark. So he says she was a Greek or a whatever she is, Syrophoenician by the nation. So the woman, and a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of Jesus, and came and fell at his feet. That's pretty humble. And the woman was a Greek, whatever she was, some kind of Phoenician by nation, although it says Canaanite in the other, gospel. And she besought him. So she asked Jesus that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. Please, cast the devil out of my daughter. And Jesus is like, he just blows her off, doesn't even talk to her. Okay? Yeah, and this one he talks to her. The other one he just blows her off at first. So this misses stage one of Jesus completely blowing her off, and then his apostles going, get rid of this woman, will you? And then it gets to this point. It says, but Jesus said to her, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and cast it to the dogs. In other words, I'm not going to give any blessings to your children when I've got good Jews to take care of. And she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, but the dogs under the table still eat the children's crumbs. And then he gives in and says, all right, the devil's gone from her. He's done. All right, now get out of here. Yeah, and when she was come out to her house, she found that the devil was gone. So, yeah, the other one's a little bit more in depth, but I was doing that another day. So, Jesus, not all inclusive. He told the person of the wrong race to get the hell out of here. You're bugging me. I've got better stuff to do. I've got Jews to take care of. I don't need to give blessings to you people. So that's in inspired version of the Bible, Genesis chapter 9. I don't know, late in the 20s, verse 25, 28, something like that. So anyway, Joseph Smith adds to it where it just says, "Cursed be Canaan, the servant of servants shall he be unto his brother Shem," and all that stuff, because Ham saw his dad naked when he was drunk. Noah was a drunk guy that day. And so Ham's son Canaan supposedly got cursed. But Joseph Smith makes sure we realize that he got turned black, because he says the veil of darkness shall cover him, that all men may know him. So it's recognizable. He's recognizably dark, and that's the lineage that the Canaanites are supposed to come through. So, oh well, maybe I'll find that again. I had that. I think it was on the other thing there on my phone. Okay. Translation of some ancient records that have fallen into our hands. So this was Abraham chapter 1. So let's just take a quick peek, just to show people that don't, know this. I've done this on the other video, so I'm not going to go too in depth on it. Anyway, so this is, where they're going to sacrifice Abraham and all this stuff, in the land of Chaldea, which, there were no Chaldeans for another 1,000 years. But the Bible got it wrong, and Joseph Smith evidently copied out of the Bible, which is probably why he said Jehovah was saving him, and Jehovah doesn't exist. But Tyndale put it in the Bible in like the 15th, 16th century, so Joseph Smith got faked out. Didn't know the Catholics invented Jehovah. Anyway, now this king of Egypt was a descendant from the loins of Ham, and was a partaker of the blood of the Canaanites by birth. From this descent sprang all the Egyptians, and thus the blood of the Canaanites was preserved in the land. So what do we got that? The curse on the Canaanites. And what is that curse? Yeah, here was that verse anyway before. "And his voice was unto me, saying, Abraham, Abraham, my name is Jehovah, and I have heard you, and I have come down to save you. Aren't you lucky?" Too bad I wasn't available when those 3 girls just got murdered earlier that were virgins. Yeah, so, Jehovah, there was no Jehovah 2000 BC when Abraham, the Catholics made that up in the 13th century AD. So Joseph Smith implicated himself by copying Tyndale's, putting that into the Bible after the Catholics made it up. Because it wouldn't be in the book of Abraham or in the book of Mormon. He screwed up and put it in there too. Besides that, he's saying Abraham. Okay, this is before he went into Egypt. His name was Abram back then, according to the Bible, so he screwed that up too. He screwed up so many things. In here, it's ridiculous. But watch the Abraham videos that I've got on that. Maybe I'll show them again. But they're in the. I got playlists in the Dodger Game channel. I even got a couple of playlists, I think, in the Mormon Truth video channel. Okay, they're in Chaldea, of course. In King Pharaoh signifies king by royal blood, which of course is not true. In Egypt, it says Egypt means Egypt, which is a descendant of the loins of Ham, with the blood of the Canaanites by birth. Okay, so all the Egyptians came from the Canaanites, which means they couldn't have the priesthood, which we're about to read. The land of Egypt, first being discovered by a woman who was the daughter of Ham, and his wife, obviously, and the daughter of Egyptus. So Ham's wife was Egyptus, which in the Chaldean, which didn't exist then, signifies Egypt, which signifies that was forbidden, which is a complete lie. And I think Egypt is like a Greek word because it was called Kemet by the Egyptians. Greek didn't exist, and Egypt means like the departing of the soul or something. It has nothing to do with being forbidden. So just more complete BS that's in here that Joseph Smith made up. When this woman discovered the land, it was under water. Why? Because the flood had just happened and it hadn't gotten drained off yet. Who afterwards settled her sons in it. Didn't know who the baby daddy was, or he was gone or something. And thus from Ham sprang that race which preserved the curse in the land. Because Ham married Egyptus, which is forbidden, because she was a negress on the boat. So That's how we got the Canaanites. And she was already pregnant, according to some other legend, which is why we had people that, maybe she had twins that were pure black, which is why we could have pure black people. Why, her children with Ham should have came out looking like Obama, right? Because he was white and she was black. She was one of the cursed Canaanites that we read about in Moses chapter 7. So this, we're trying to explain how we got these races through the scriptures, which is what Joseph Smith was doing when he said, "Oh, God cursed the Lamanites to turn them dark. That's why the Indians have the tan going on, and they don't look like, the white people that Joseph Smith said, came across the ocean from Israel." Even though a lot of people from the Middle East have, a little bit of a tan. He was explaining the pigmentation of the American Indians, Native Americans as they're called, because they've been native here for 15,000 years. But they're Siberian runaways. Came from Siberia, from the Mongoloid race, which has a different skull from the Caucasians and has generally darker skin. And Joseph Smith only explained what he noticed, which was their tan. And now the DNA says Joseph Smith was basically making stuff up like he did with everything else. And you want to go share this with the world? When this woman discovered the land was underwater, who afterwards settled her sons in it, and thus from Ham sprang that race which preserved the curse in the land. Now the first government of Egypt was established by Pharaoh, the eldest son of Egyptus, the daughter of Ham and Egyptus. And it was after the manner of the government of Ham, which was patriarchal. Now Pharaoh, being a righteous man, even though he was Negro, wow, that's generous, Joseph, established his kingdom and judged his people wisely and justly all his days, seeking earnestly to imitate that order established by the fathers in the first generations in the days of the first patriarchal reign, even in the reign of Adam, and also Noah, his father, Ham's father, who blessed him with the blessings of the earth and with the blessings of wisdom. But he cursed him as pertaining to the priesthood. No priesthood for you. Now Pharaoh, being of that lineage by which he could not have the right of priesthood, notwithstanding Pharaohs would fain claim it from Noah through Ham, therefore my father was led away by their idolatry. Blah, blah, blah. So, there we have it. Joseph Smith wrote it into the book of Abraham, why Negroes cannot have the priesthood. But the church blames it all on Brigham Young. Why? And they say Elijah Abel had the priesthood. Being a 70 or an apostle has nothing to do with priesthood. We're used to that now, but that's got, if you look in the Bible, no. Jesus wasn't saying, I am ordaining you to become, hold the Melchizedek priesthood to Peter, James, and John, and those guys. It says nothing like that. Priesthood has to do with Jews barbecuing animals, slaughtering them, murdering them, and cooking them so Elohim can get off sniffing them. Elohim, excuse me, that's Mormonism. That's just Hebrew for God, or the gods. So Yahweh, YHWH, can get off sniffing burning animal flesh all the way on Kolob. That's what Jewish priesthood is about. So we have the priesthood in the Old Testament. They're animal killers to, give atonement for our sins, just like, the Aztec Indians or whatever. People all over the world have used blood atonement, and the Jews did it too for their God Yahweh, who Christianity blended into, one God. Jesus said he was that guy because he said before Abraham was, I am. And he was also called I am, supposedly. So somehow, Jesus, he's just a nicer version of Yahweh. He went through anger management, right before he got born or something. I don't know. So that's the problem here. So the LDS Church blames it all on Brigham because he said some things like, Negroes have a flat nose and black skin because God cursed him for being, not arguing with Lucifer and the people that followed him that wanted everybody to be able to live in heaven instead of having, 99% of us burn in hell. So that's wicked, right? That's what the scriptures pretty much say. All right. So anyway, lots of problems with this. So there we go. Joseph Smith is the one that came up with this. And Elijah Abel, we have no proof that he ever held the priesthood. He had plenty of opportunities to say that he did. He only said Joseph Smith said he deserved it, but he was a 70, but couldn't produce a priesthood certificate. So we don't necessarily need to blame it all on Brigham Young. Not that Brigham's good. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the church wants to throw him under the bus because it makes it easy. It's a wonderful, convenient thing, which we also find in that essay, which just says Brigham was a follower, which doesn't sound like Brigham, but yeah, he's just a prejudiced, bigoted follower, and that's why Negroes didn't have the priesthood. But that's not the way it looks here. This is clearly in the scriptures, but of course they ignore these conveniently. In-depth, straightforward essays, multiple sources, but they just can't find their own damn scriptures. Amazing, huh? Another problem with this, so Joseph Smith, has somebody fork out $2,400, which was a lot of money back then, to get these mummies and stuff, and including these the papyrus that actually turned out to have nothing to do with Abraham at all, which, some dude's funeral 2,000 years later, an Egyptian had zilch to do with Abraham, which is why the reorganized church dumped the book of Abraham, because it's complete horse manure. Has nothing to do with Abraham. Neither did Joseph Smith's alphabet of Egyptian. Neither did the facsimiles. Nothing. It was all completely fake. So, and then we got an essay to look at on that too, which is where we're about to go very shortly. But what I did want to mention is he also said there was, besides lying and saying that this was written by the hand of Abraham, which it wasn't. And the church admits basically that. They just try not to use the word lie. They said he just got inspired looking at these completely unrelated, Egyptian documents that he paid for nothing. But, which makes about as much sense as creating the rest of the universe on day 4. But there was the book of Joseph, and he didn't even bother to translate that after forking out all this money. But see, the book of Joseph, maybe that reminds us of the fact that, the book of Abraham says that these people, they couldn't hold the priesthood. They were cursed, and that's where all the Egyptians came from. It just said that right here. From that lineage by which he could not have the right of priesthood. And from that came all the Egyptians. Joseph married an Egyptian girl, the daughter of the high priest of the sun god in Heliopolis. So Manasseh and Ephraim, sorry, you can't have the priesthood. Sorry, Joseph Smith, you couldn't have the priesthood because you're supposed to be from Ephraim and Judah, maybe. So one drop's all it takes. I was from Ephraim. I guess I never had the priesthood. Shit. Oh, shoot. Excuse me. Yeah. It's a problem. That's why I think he didn't bother to translate it. Translate it. Try not to blaspheme. Translated. He made this crap up. Would have taken him 2 days if he had his seers done. He did like 7 pages a day. Book, what is this? Like about a dozen pages. He said he did 7 pages a day when he did the Book of Mormon with his brown rock. So how come he couldn't do it now? All right, more on the Book of Abraham, because there's a Gospel Topics essay on it, and they just tell us, well, yeah, we realize that the documents really don't say squat about Abraham, but he just got inspired. And it honestly says stuff like that. So let's take a little look at it. Race. We'll go to race here, because we've been in that. Okay, bye. Happy Canaanite family. We are going back to the Gospel Topics essays, and then we'll find the one on Abraham. Just for a moment, and then I've done more in-depth stuff in that, like the one on Prove All Things. It's a really pretty good one, I think. Takes a little long because I use scriptures and stuff. But hey, you look at all the time you spend in Sunday school and seminary and stuff, and you can talk about going on a mission. In a matter of a very short period of time, you can learn that you've been lied to. But I like to document it. I'm just going to make stuff up. It's like some anti-Mormon Ed Decker God Makers film guy or some stuff saying Joseph Smith's blood atoned for our sins. No, we're going to find it right in the LDS Scripture. So where's the Book of Abraham one here? Take a quick peek at it, and then here we go. Translation and historicity of the Book of Abraham. So also I did CES letter number 3, portion number 3, and kind of got a lot into that, deeper than the CES letter gets into it, because talk about some things that Jeremy Reynolds doesn't talk about in his CES letter that got enough, lots of people to notice there were basically questions that the church educational system refused to answer, the prophets, apostles refused to answer, and this is the best they got, which is basically we've shown how dishonest they are. Alright, so it says, the Church of Jesus Christ embraces the Book of Abraham as Scripture. Alright. This book is a record. Oh, it's a record again. How can it be a freaking record if he made this stuff up? I'm trying not to cuss here. Come on. I'm trying. Because it has nothing to do with the Papyrus. This book, a record of the biblical prophet and patriarch Abraham, recounts how Abraham sought the blessings of the priesthood, rejected the idolatry of his father, covenanted with Jehovah, who never existed, married Sarai, moved to Canaan. You notice how he married Sarai and she turns into Sarah, and then Lehi does the same thing in the Book of Mormon. Joseph Smith copycat. Moved to Canaan and Egypt and received knowledge about the creation. The Book of Abraham largely follows the biblical narrative, but adds important information regarding Abraham's life and teachings. Yeah, and the facsimiles add things that I've shown in the, especially for youth ones. So I got like 7 episodes there, and so we got astrotheology in there showing, the sun gets its light from Kolob, from a star in the center of the galaxy or something. All kinds of completely nutty stuff, but, watch those. They're pretty interesting. We can go over those, so I'm not going to totally redo that stuff here. That goes all through the facsimiles and stuff here, and shows what we're supposed to learn from Book of Abraham, and then you realize it's totally stinking nuts. The Book of Abraham was first published in 1842, of course, right when they changed the endowment and put Freemasonry into it, like I was saying, and was canonized, and I mean right when, this is between March and May, which is exactly, he came Freemason in March and changed the endowment in early May 4th. So, Book of Abraham was first published in 1842 and was canonized as part of the Pearl of Great Price in 1880. The book originated with Egyptian papyri. We did it, but it says that now, but then we'll prove that that's complete BS. That Joseph Smith translated, but he didn't translate it. Everything in that papyri is about, some dude 2,000 years later, some Egyptian guy having a funeral and stuff. Translated beginning in 1835. Yeah, it said he was working on it, but he couldn't do squat. It took him 7 years, and suddenly when he needed to keep the Negroes out of the endowment, he comes up with it boom! As fast as you can write a story. Even though it's full of false information, like I was barely mentioning, but in those other videos, I really go over that. Many people saw the papyri. Oh. Well, too bad they couldn't see the golden plates. They could just pick ones up that weighed the amount of tin instead of gold hiding under a cover, or have guys visualize it and have Oliver Cowdery sign their names and say that they were all witnesses. That's in the CES letter ones too. Details on that. But no eyewitness account of the translation survives. Making it impossible to reconstruct the process. Only small fragments of the long papyrus scrolls, once in Joseph Smith's possession, exist today. Emma sold the stuff later. She said, I need some money, I don't need this crap. And it turned out to have nothing to do with Abraham. The relationship between those fragments and the text we have today is largely a matter of conjecture. That's fancy talk for saying it has jack squat to do with it. We do know some things about the translation process. The word translation typically assumes an expert knowledge of multiple languages. Joseph Smith claimed no expertise in any language. He readily acknowledged that he was one of the weak things of the world. Oh, let's make him sound humble. That's not what the women said he sounded like, and Nauvoo said he couldn't stop talking about himself. Alright, speaking of the translation of the Book of Mormon, the Lord says, "You cannot write that which is sacred, save it has come from me." Okay, the Lord also said, D&C 17:6, that the Book of Mormon was correct and true. We've had almost 4,000 translation changes since then because it was so screwed up, so false, so filled with errors. The most corrected book on earth, maybe, after Jesus said it was wonderfully translated and correct. As the Lord your God liveth, it is correct. It is true. D&C 17:6. Done it in other videos. You can look it up. By the gift and power of God, Joseph Smith received knowledge about the life and teachings of Abraham. Oh, now it's by the gift and power of God he learned about Abraham, because it doesn't have squat to do with anything in the papyrus. So let's take a quick peek at where they do mention that here. They try to make it sound they have to say so much to try to make it sound okay. Alright, so they're talking about all this doctrine that Joseph Smith introduces in the Book of Abraham. Origin, the powerful truths, and the... Spare me, please, okay? I've asked you before, but you never respond. This is talking to the Jedi Mormon who says he comes here to correct anything that's false, but he leaves his biscuit on the doorstep every morning, and then when he's refuted, he just stays quiet and comes back on the next morning and runs away. I've asked you before, but you never respond. How do you reconcile belief in a global flood? Okay, so we talked a little bit about that. You know, the Lamanites or whoever, the American Indians were not washed away. The Egyptians weren't. I've shown that elsewhere. Even the Bible dictionary shows the Egyptians going through without getting washed away. Babylonians, Sumerians, Chinese, blacks cursed for not fighting valiantly enough in some pre-life war. Polygamy, we haven't gotten into that on this one yet. Book of Abraham, okay, we just did that. Using a rock in a hat, we did that. Horses in America, pre-Columbian horses, yet, the anthropologists tell us we're not here before Columbus, so why does the Book of Mormon have horses, elephants, chariots, steel, stuff that pretty much wasn't there. Wheat, whatever. All these records that we don't have. Millions dying in wars but leaving no trace. All the suicidal children in Utah. In case you don't know, ages 10 to 17 in Utah, biggest cause of death is suicide in Utah. Never ever showing the plates physically to anyone. No one saw them. The Mountain Meadows massacre underneath the priesthood basically directed the mass murder of all those people. The Fancher party, plus maybe some apostates that Brigham wanted them to kill. Using a rock and a hat. He already said I mentioned that twice. So he's like, come on, Jedi, give us some answers. So anyway, we've been trying to cover some of those, but they're not really... Well, they're not the way they told us in Sunday school. So once again, ask yourself, do you really believe that? Do you really believe that God told Joseph Smith to break his covenant with Emma, to have all those other women, when he'd promised to cleave unto her and none else? He had a normal marriage covenant, forsaking all other women, so God told him to break his promise to Emma, break the terms of the contract, and then tell Emma she'd be destroyed if she didn't like him hanging out with all these other women and doing his thing. And wrecking other dudes' families, taking 11 guys' wives for all eternity, according to LDS, websites like Family Search. Yeah, apostles' wives, they go on a mission, they lose their wives. So, we'll get into that one probably later. For now, I think I'll sign off. And so these are questions to ask yourself. All that polygamy stuff, there's too much I'm not just going to get into that right now. I'm just not going to do it. I've got the videos on that in the channel. So let's just do a quick little take a peek here at some of the stuff I got in here, so we can see. So alrighty. So this is such a nice browser. So what was I looking for? Okay, so here we go. So this is like one of my channels here. This is the Dodger Game channel. So we got here. See these playlists here, like CES letter reviewed. So it's like, whatever, about 10 of them in there. Prove all things. Yeah, 50 problems with Mormon Church. So we got. So yeah, this is playlists. Maybe we need to like refresh it. Yeah. Oh, cool. All right. So look at all these. The CES letter review ones, and of course CES letter was not written by the devil. It was Jeremy Rennell's, it's a returned missionary and church educational system director. He wrote a letter to him asking these questions. Can you clear these things up? Like, why do we have these things that are not consistent with an all-knowing, unchanging God guiding the church? Why do we have some of these issues? Why does the Book of Mormon got all this stuff copied out of the Bible that's translated wrong, and stuff that, Joseph Smith translated different in the Joseph Smith translation, but he said the Catholic Church screwed it all up, but that happens to be in the Book of Mormon, or 3,913 corrections in the Book of Mormon since Jesus said it was already correct, and doctrines changing and whatever. Just a bunch more stuff than we've already just gone into, which already showed completely there's no stinking possibility that any person with a brain can reconcile this stuff. All right, playlists. Okay, so actually, this is a playlist. It's a CES letter. That's a playlist. So it's got all these ones on the CES letter, or we got all these ones on the Book of Abraham, and scriptural contradictions. So I got a playlist there. Book of Mormon, historicity, DNA, and scientific plausibility issues. So there's 32 videos in that one right there, having to do with that. Mormonism and magic. There's 8 videos there. 6 videos in another Mormonism and magic or something. Mormon polygamy, polyandry, and the spiritual wife system. We got 22 videos in there. Not to mention a couple of the ones that are in the CES. Joseph Smith's first vision. And historical conflicts, whatever. Yeah, that makes it easy. There's about 209 in there, maybe. Can't figure out, what's up with church history out of that, then you might as well get a brain transplant, because there's a lot of information in there, and a lot of it's documented. Not all of them go through documentation, but many do. So trying to make it easy for you to discover the church's history, and I hope this was helpful today, taking a look at some of the things on the Gospel Topics essays and elsewhere and in the LDS scriptures, which are pretty hard to believe unless you're pretty wasted. And since you're not supposed to be getting wasted on your missions, it might be kind of hard to actually believe this stuff if you really look at the details instead of listen to people whose mind control techniques, just like the Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientologists, and Moonies do, saying, "Don't look, it's Lucifer trying to deceive you. Don't look out there. Don't look at that man behind the curtain. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain." Because when you do, when you read the details, as we just looked at in the scriptures versus the Gospel Topics essays, we found out that they lied to us, and the brethren approved them. So, is it clear enough? Go through and watch it a few times. It takes a while to sink in. Believe me, the programming runs deep. In the Name of the Age of Reason, a book written by Thomas Paine, possibly an Illuminist, which showed us a lot of things that are like this in the Bible. Like, subscribe, share it with others. Research it. Get into the channel, the Dodger Game channel and the Mormon Truth channel. Videos, Mormon Truth videos channel. Dodger's Game's got more in it, but some of the ones are a little more refined on the Mormon Truth videos. I try to keep it clean most of the time, but as you may have noticed, I slip occasionally. Dodger Game out. And the Dodger Game is coming on in the World Series. Pray for the Dodgers. Pray to Adonai or Elohim. Oh, that's the same guy. Don't pray to him. He's a jerk. I don't know. Pray to somebody. Or just enjoy the game. Stay sober. Don't drive drinking. Out.